Vote SNP to build a future made in Scotland for Scotland.
The Scottish Government has once again placed independence at the centre of political debate with the publication of a new policy paper titled Your Right to Decide. The document, only 22 pages long, might appear slim, but its significance lies in what it represents. It marks the SNP's attempt to reset the independence conversation after years of frustration, leadership turmoil and electoral decline. First Minister John Swinney, speaking at the launch, insisted that Scotland's constitutional future should be determined by the people who live in Scotland, not by the politicians in Westminster. With the next Holyrood election due in May 2026, Swinney is making it clear that his party will go into that contest seeking a mandate for a second referendum. The question is whether this new strategy offers anything different from the repeated attempts of the past decade, or whether it is destined to run into the same brick wall. To understand the present moment, we need to look back. The 2014 independence referendum is still the anchor point of this debate. That vote produced a turnout of more than 84%, the highest record in any UK election, and delivered a result of 55% against independence and 45% in favour. Westminster declared it a once-in-a-generation event. Yet politics has shifted dramatically in the years since. The UK's departure from the European Union was a defining shock, particularly as Scotland voted strongly to remain. Many Scots felt that the promise of stability within the Union had been undermined. The rise of Conservative governments under leaders like Theresa May and Boris Johnson also strained relations, with Johnson especially unpopular in Scotland. Meanwhile, Nicola Sturgeon, leading Scotland through the COVID-19 pandemic, gave the SNP a higher profile than ever before, projecting the idea that Holyrood could handle crises differently from London. These moments fed into a sense that the independence question was unfinished business. In the 2019 general election, the SNP captured 48 of Scotland's 59 seats at Westminster. In the Scottish Parliament elections of 2016 and 2021, the SNP, supported by the Greens, formed pro-independence majorities. Between the summer of 2020 and the start of 2021, every major poll showed more people supporting independence than opposing it. The first sustained lead for the independence movement in history. There were genuine moments when it looked as if momentum might be unstoppable. But then the same structural problem kept re-emerging. Legally, the Scottish Parliament cannot organise a binding referendum without Westminster's consent. In 2014, that consent was given through what's known as a Section 30 order. Since 2017, the SNP has asked for that same order several times. Each time, the answer from Downing Street was the same: no. Prime Ministers from May to Johnson to Sunak all insisted that the 2014 vote had settled the matter for a generation. Sturgeon tried to break this deadlock in 2022 by asking the UK Supreme Court whether Holyrood could legislate for a referendum without Westminster. The court's judgment was unanimous: it could not. In response, Sturgeon suggested treating the next general election as a de facto referendum. If a majority of votes went to pro-independence parties, the Scottish Government would treat that as a mandate to open negotiations on independence. But that idea never gathered momentum. It was watered down by her successor, Humza Yousaf, and eventually dropped altogether. By 2024, the political tide had turned against the SNP. In that year's general election, the party fell from 48 Westminster seats to just 9, handing Labour a resounding victory in Scotland. It was one of the worst results in the SNP's modern history and triggered doubts about whether independence remained at the heart of its project. Swinney, who became leader shortly before that vote, made moves that seemed to confirm those doubts. He scrapped the post of Minister for Independence, closed the government's independence unit, and shelved the long-running Building a New Scotland series of prospectus papers. Prime Minister Keir Starmer even remarked that in his early meetings with Swinney, the subject of independence hadn't come up once. Yet, politics is never static. Over the summer of 2025, Swinney sought to reposition the party by publishing Your Right to Decide and delivering a speech that placed independence back at the core of SNP policy. He signalled that the cause was not being abandoned. What makes his approach distinct is his insistence that the only proven route to a referendum is through an outright SNP majority in the Scottish Parliament. He points back to 2011, when Alex Salmond led the SNP to its first ever majority at Holyrood. That victory forced Westminster to negotiate the terms of the 2014 referendum. By contrast, in 2016 and 2021, the SNP fell short of a majority and relied on the Greens to form pro-independence majorities, but no referendum followed. The lesson, in Swinney's eyes, is that only a single-party SNP majority can break the logjam. The problem is that this plan still leaves power in Westminster's hands. There is nothing legally binding about the precedent of 2011. Even if the SNP does secure a majority, London could simply refuse again. The UK's constitutional framework means the Scottish Parliament does not have the unilateral right to authorise a vote. The only way around that would be a Catalonia-style unauthorised referendum, something the SNP has always firmly rejected. Swinney is gambling that by replicating 2011, he can create a political pressure that a UK government cannot ignore. There is no guarantee that Keir Starmer would respond the way that David Cameron did a decade earlier. Then there is the matter of winning that majority in the first place. Current polls show that the SNP are still ahead, but not by enough to make an outright win look likely. In both 2016 and 2021, the party polled higher than it does today and still fell short of a majority. Swinney is effectively asking voters to recreate a result that happened only once in the history of devolution. To do that, he needs to re-energise independent supporters who may have drifted away amid the party's recent scandals and disappointments. The hope is that framing the 2026 election as the key to securing a referendum will bring those voters back into the fold. Inside the SNP, not everyone agrees with this cautious line. Some activists argue that Swinney's approach is too timid, given how many times Westminster has refused. Ahead of the party's annual conference, local branches have tabled amendments calling for a tougher stance, including reviving the de facto referendum plan and counting votes for other pro-independence parties, like the Greens and Alba, as part of the mandate. Now, these debates highlight the difference between supporting independence and supporting the SNP. Polls often show that more Scots favour independence than are willing to vote for the SNP. Swinney must find a way to close that gap if his strategy is to work. Stepping back from the SNP's internal struggles, the broader picture of the union looks increasingly fragile. In Scotland, the largest party remains committed to independence. In Wales, Plaid Cymru continues to push for greater autonomy and in some cases full independence. In Northern Ireland, Sinn Féin has become the largest party and openly advocates for Irish unification. Taken together, this means that in all three devolved nations, the leading political forces are parties whose ultimate goal is that to loosen or break the union. Doesn't mean the UK is about to collapse, but it does highlight a deepening sense of disillusionment across the country. So where does this leave John Swinney's new strategy? On paper, it is clear and easy to communicate. Win a majority, demand a referendum, and point to a precedent. It avoids complicated legal arguments or risky unilateral moves, but it comes with serious risks. First, it sets a very high bar, one that the SNP has only cleared once before. Second, even if that bar is cleared, success still depends on Westminster saying yes. The party may succeed in making independence the central issue again, but it cannot control the response from London. Ultimately, the independence movement remains alive because it taps into something deeper than party politics. For many Scots, Brexit, Conservative governments and a sense of cultural divergence have all combined to fuel the argument that Scotland should make its own decisions. But movements are one thing. Political breakthroughs are another. Whether Swinney's plan reinvigorates the SNP or merely sets up another round of frustration will depend on the mood of the electorate next year and the willingness of the UK government to compromise. For now, the independence question remains unresolved, but it is clear that it is not going to go away. If you found this breakdown useful, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more updates.